Apple Vision Pro, and AWS. Stick around and learn how you can use XR and the cloud together. I built this app using ARKit a couple years ago, and it allows me to download models from AWS, and those models are shown below, and then visualize those models and actually manipulate those models with sound capabilities as well. So we're going to rebuild this same thing using the Vision Pro in 3 parts. Stick around. We're going to walk through how to get started with AWS and the Vision Pro by following some simple steps, starting with downloading Xcode Beta. If you want to get started with Xcode and AWS, the best thing to do is create a new project using the Vision Pro and Xcode Beta 2, which is available for everyone to download. Getting started with it's super easy, nothing new here. The first thing you want to do is make sure you selected Vision OS as your OS, and then you're greeted with this default, which is the Hello World default, and it should run just by clicking the play button. You should be able to see a window, and in the window you should see the 3D object, and then you can go back and take a look at your desktop or whatever they're calling it. Next thing you want to do is set up your AWS keys on your local machine and set up the AWS CLI. And I'm assuming here at this point you have an AWS account, but if you do not, plenty of tutorials on setting up an AWS account. But here you want your access keys and your access key ID, and you want to make sure that you are operating in the region of your choice. I'm going to set up an S3 bucket shortly, but before we do that, we're just going to make sure that we've exported our keys onto our device that we're programming on. I am using a Mac, so I'm going to use this export command that you see in front of you, but if you're in Windows, you also can use Windows, and then this is the region that you're actually going to be working in. So very important to take a look at the regions, because some services operate in a specific region. And we're going to be start off with S3, which is our simple storage service to grab a 3D object. If you're going to operate in the sandbox, this is the appropriate way to get started with AWS and the sandbox. But in this case, we're just going to be on the Vision Pro in the simulator, so no need to utilize the sandbox here. But this is just how. So down the important things, we've now have our access keys, we've downloaded the CLI. We want to take our access keys and put those into our environment variables, as you see here. So you want to go to Edit Scheme in Xcode's product menu, and then enter the region, the key ID, and the key. So we'll do that. Following that, the next thing we want to do is ensure that we have the CLI downloaded if we hadn't done so already. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to use the Mac instructions for downloading the CLI. So I click on that, the download happens, the DMG file, I open that up, and I'm greeted with these instructions. I'm going to install the software. The software version is important. You want version 2. And I'm going to accept the license agreement after reading it, of course. And I'm going to install for all users on this computer because it's only me on this computer. And that's how big it is, 141. And the install location, I leave it as default. And as this is going, if you don't have access to a Mac, you can actually use a Mac OS EC2 instance and make this work. I'm going to have another video on that coming soon. Install is done. I'm going to move all this to trash. And now getting started with the CLI, I'm been using it for years, so don't need to really spend a whole lot of time here. But just to show you that sometimes you'll get this invalid CLI driver error. And the way to get around that is ensure that you've installed in the correct location. I've moved the location, and now I'm going to choose the packages that I want in my project. So in my case, I know I want the S3, and I also know that I might be using Cognito and DynamoDB and a few other things. So I'm going to grab those. And if you have any problems, by the way, getting the CLI to operate, definitely you can reach out to me and I can help you out. But I'm going to be using API Gateway. And as I look down here, lots of things I could be using, but I'm just selecting the ones that I need. And as you select these, remember that these library packages are going to be, a copy is going to be created locally. So don't go willy-nilly selecting them all, because it's going to take that much longer for your projects to build, and that could be kind of annoying. Just use the ones you need. And in my case, S3 is really the one I need at this point for this demo. In future demos, we're going to use Amplify, and Amplify comes with a lot of its own libraries, but basically under it, they're going to be using the same ones that I just selected: Cognito, DynamoDB, and API Gateway and S3. So those are the important ones. And what Amplify is really good for is connecting that server component and creating the server component, as well as the client side. So it gets a really good start. And what we're doing is really a really super manual way of doing the same thing, but just for posterity to show you how you can do it without going to Amplify. This is how you would do it. Essentially, we're creating the client side of what an Amplify project would create. And the Amplify project would actually create the server side as well. So like I said, again, it's a huge step forward, huge lift forward. And the way to utilize Amplify in Vision Pro is simply to download the Amplify project. Then you're going to select that this is a Vision Pro project, and I'll show you guys how to do that in a future video, like I said. So I'm going to pick my last. Well, I'm going to actually add SQLDB at some point, but I'm going to pick my last one or two that I need, and that's just S3. I'm going to make sure I'm going to look down and see if there's anything else that I might want. And as I said, the more you grab, the bigger this thing gets. So it would take a lot longer to build the more stuff you grab. So I'm grabbing SageMaker because, like I said in the future video, we're certainly going to be doing other things like transcribing and using large language models. This project is going to get quite large real fast, and the build's going to take a long time. But for you to start, let's just go with simple. And if you want to get rid of any of them, you can just change you can just hit the minus on the package, and it will go away. You can see here now, my build's going to take a whole lot longer than it ever took before because of all of these different packages that I brought in for the first time. After a while, the packages will be cached, and that part of the build will be much easier, and it won't take this long. You can see here the pre-planning for my build has gone to 848 steps from, I believe it was like 300 and some change. So that is significantly longer, something to think about. Again, accept the packages that you think you actually will use, and you can always add them later. The point of the AWS for Swift is that it's very versatile and allows you to add or subtract as necessary. couple other things to look at while we're sitting here is the project format. I'm using Xcode 14 Plus. And then you might notice that it comes with Reality Kit content down on the bottom there. I'm not going to be using Reality Kit content in this demo, but I can also show you how to do that as well. So now, as we go to build our app, what you'll notice is it does take a while to get started with initially the new packages. But once the new packages are all done, in the preview now I can see I've actually changed the I think it's a sphere that was there before. I've changed it so that it is a Vision Pro headset. I mean, that's something reasonable that you'd want to see in a Vision Pro application. So now when I launch the application, the first thing I'm going to be greeted with is the application icon, this default icon, very easy to change when you get to the point of production, but I leave that till the very end. And you'll see that it's going to take a little while to load first time through with all of those packages. You can change the room that you're in, whether it's day or night. You can zoom in, zoom out. As just a bonus at the end, I am going to kind of run through how to zoom in and out and all those kinds of details. You do need developer tools, and it should have downloaded with your installation of Xcode. But if it didn't, and here's your chance, developer tools will try to download, and then you will also need to install it. So you would definitely have to accept the installation. So now my app is starting to run, and you can see here, there's my headset. I'm using a mouse, so it's easier to kind of move around here. But also I'm in a window, so I don't have to be in a window. I can use a volume, as you've seen probably lots of content creators talk about windows and volumes and things like that, and operating in Swift UI, so I'm not going to repeat those. But if you go to WWDC 2023, you can see all those kinds of details. You can see here, I'm in a window group. If I go to content view, there I am. So what we want to do is actually replace this model with another model. In this part one, just make sure it's not too long, we're going to get the model from S3. In part two, we'll actually do some things with the model, maybe move it around using DynamoDB or others, just to show that the instance of the model can, or the entity of the model that you download can be manipulated, changed, whatever you want to do with it in the original in S3 would stay the same. So on the S3 side, we're going to add some 3D models to our bucket. I'm going to create a bucket first, add some 3D models to it. And then you really want those models to be of type USDZ. And the reason for it is that is one of the model types that Apple recommends and supports right out of the box. So I have a little bit of code here just to show what's going on here. This will also be available in my GitHub, my private GitHub, and then at some point I'll probably do the same tutorial for AWS, and then it'll be in my my AWS GitHub for all of you to utilize. That's a little bit longer process, so for now it's going to be my private GitHub, and you're welcome to use it, and it's not affiliated with AWS. So here, so now I'm able to, with this code that will be available to you, I'm able to now grab a new model. As you saw there on the bottom, it's showing me a new file, and that new file is at this location. This Boston Dynamics spot is the model that I'm using, and it's now showing up inside of the core simulator for this device type. Just as a little bonus, and again, all this code will be available to you. Just as a bonus, this is kind of moving around inside of the simulator environment. Again, I'm using a mouse, so much easier for me to move around. I can zoom in and out. I have a scroll wheel so I can move forward and backwards. I can rotate. There's a little zoom for you. Rotating around. Definitely not feeling any kind of vertigo effects because, again, I'm on a desktop. I have not worn the Vision Pro yet. Hopefully in the next week I'll be able to wear one. But as you can see, the simulator is amazing. It's very well done, and I've used them all. Just simple, not overly done, exactly what you need, nothing more. And I do like the idea of being immersed or semi-immersed if necessary, and that you can go through the window. Yeah, zooming in and out is quite nice. So I can imagine standing up and walking around my content, and I'm excited to see what we can do with it, especially in engineering applications. As you all know, I'm very involved in robotics, and I would like to simulate the entirety of my robot builds using the Vision Pro. So just a couple more things that you can do. Like I said, you can reset the camera. I can change my scene, capture the keyboard, capture the pointer, save the screen, go to home. So there I've taken a screenshot. Very awesome. I can re-drag and resize the window. I can drag the entirety of the window. Move the window wherever I'd like to move it. Interesting things that I found from WWDC is that your window is active when you're looking at it, and when you're not looking at it, it is not active. So can't expect to do things like have a real-time like stock ticker up in the corner that would refresh on its own. Likely you would have to look at it at least once to make it refresh. But we'll see. I haven't used it yet. I don't want to speculate on things I haven't seen. But I am already liking some of the apps and some of the ways some of these apps already look. And of course, I use other devices, not saying anything negative about any of them. I just like the way this is well done. And it's like everything was thought out. Because this is a beta, one of the things I did notice is that there was, and I'm also on a really, really old MacBook Pro. Sometimes there were some intermediate crashes and some logs that I had to look at to see why it was crashing. That was very, very sparingly. It didn't happen often. Just a little bit more of a look around. Starting Safari again. The last time it crashed, but I believe that was a My Machine issue. I do have a brand new spanking MacBook Pro, but I'm using it as my production box, and I don't want to be putting development content on my production box. If you made it this far in the video, I thank you for making this far. I could probably have stopped at minute 12, but here we're just going to go off and take a look at something in the web browser. I have access to my actual keyboard. That's pretty cool. And then it's also allowing peripheral devices, so I can have my Magic Mouse and keyboard if I want, and use those instead of just trying to type in midair. So there is a virtual keyboard. I don't know how often I'm going to use that, because in some of my other devices I never use them. I use the actual keyboard, but I can imagine using more of the audio capture capability when I'm moving around and the actual keyboard on a regular basis. So I'm going to be tethered around my house, around the room, or whatever room I'm in. The dots you see on the screen here probably have something to do with me and my device, and not as I've not seen this anywhere else. But here it's very cool. I can see the browser, and I can have many windows open, and place them all over the place. And this is the one that is going to be active for me. I've played videos. Videos play well. I've done it all. So, and of what's available, besides actually running and building my applications on the device. But as you know from history, I have done this, downloading items from S3 into ARKit plenty of times. So if you want to know more, stick around and for the series.